Hi, I'm Vernon Bolling, and welcome to another edition of Focus. As I hope you know, Focus has been on the air for over 40 years. We've been continuing to bring you, the African American community, problems, accomplishments, as well as successes that we've had within the African American community. Don't touch that remote. Matter of fact, you can get your pencils or papers together and write down some information that we're going to give to you that's going to be very important that you probably can use later. We'll be right back with more Focus after these messages.
Little things that might seem simple could have such a big impact. I'm putting my effort towards an outcome. You have to put effort into it to be part of a community. When you play the lottery, your money stays here in Arizona. It actually goes back to your community. You're helping out your state.
This segment is for single women who are raising sons and who don't have anyone helping them out with that masculine part of raising their boys. Well, we're blessed today to have a brother with us who works at Arizona State University. We're here on the campus today to meet with Dean Alonzo Jones from ASU. Alonzo, first of all, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for thinking.
And I'm excited for a number of reasons. First of all, I wasn't even going to talk about what you just came back from Indiana doing, and you were talking about masculinity, and I think that really fits into what we're talking about here. But also because you are a father, raising 4 sons and 2 daughters.
Correct.
And to be totally candid, you do have a wife, so there is that balance between husband and wife raising, or mother and father raising the children.
Absolutely.
But some of us didn't have that advantage, and I speak for myself when I say didn't, and or don't have that advantage of having a man in the home to help raise their sons. And it's critical, as far as I know, and as I know, to have a man helping you raise a son, because a woman can't raise a man. Can you just kind of, let's talk about that a little bit, and what you see as some of the nuances that we do as single mothers raising sons that really could be to the detriment of our boys?
Profound question. Fatima, first of all, thank you for thinking of me for this segment. I know you and I have worked in the community for quite some time, and I have tremendous respect for the role that you play, and I don't mean to put this on you, but I certainly see you as sort of the mother of the Phoenix metropolitan area. And yes, I do have a parenting experience, but as you talked about, I've been blessed to do that, at least in my second marriage. In fact, I do want to say that. My first daughter comes from my first marriage. We married young and ended the marriage because of youth. And so I realize single mothers or single fathers come about in a very robust, complex narrative and for a variety of reasons. But the reality is, in today's society, young black men are often raised sort of disproportionately by single mothers. In my second marriage, my wife and I have 5 children now, and the 4 boys are the oldest, and then my youngest is my daughter, Aaliyah. She's 11 now.
The little one.
The little one is 11 now.
The big one is the incredible artist.
Yeah, he's the bass. He's the voice, right?
Okay.
I think, first of all, hats off to mothers who are raising children, including sons, and hopefully there's some connection to the father to some extent. Like in the case of my first marriage, when I chose to leave that relationship, I chose to leave my daughter, and that sort of stayed with me and has also shaped how I think about raising my sons, just sort of the nuance of some regret, some guilt, some decisions made at a young age, but trying to reconcile that both with my oldest daughter and then my 5 children with my current wife. The one thing that the blessings of a 2-parent relationship is that the burden doesn't fall 100% upon any single individual, and that we can work off of each other with a masculine energy, a feminine energy. We can complement each other in terms of decision making, reinforcing certain messages and family values and those kinds of things. So that is the blessing of a 2-parent situation. Although, asterisk, you have highly dysfunctional two-parent family situations as well. So hats off to single mothers. I think the reality is what it is, where a single mother who is raised in the world as a black woman, and the nuances of that, as a woman who has birthed the child into the world and has extension of her life in the child, and then also how she interprets the child in terms of symbolically being the outcome of a union, whether immediate, temporary, one-night stand, or over a prolonged period of time. So there's a certain mental kind of working through that as well. But where the burden, and it becomes, I believe, a burden, and perhaps it's a welcome burden, but mothers have to sort of be 100% in single parent situations in raising a child, a male child who does not share her gender, or to say it differently, her life's experience. Her behind closed doors, locker room, understanding how men move through space and how we sort of size each other up, and how we develop relationships and challenge each other, and how we express love, and how we move and navigate our physical and our emotional and our psychological selves among each other, and how we choose to sort of represent ourselves in a broader society. You know, a person that hasn't had that lived experience is sort of shooting in the dark. And so it's a tremendous burden to have to be 100% of all things to a child, when the way human life is produced, that's produced from a male and a female energy.
One of the things that I've always heard, and I often say, is that women raise their daughters and they love their sons. Mm-hmm. And I know I do have a coaching leadership development program for boys. It's called Sons, and this is a shameless plug. Mm-hmm. But it's a rites of passage program. And one of the things that I found the difference being between the boys program and the girls program, and the mothers who are the mothers of the sons and the mothers of the daughters. The mothers make sure their girls get there. They don't care if they complain. The girls come in there sulking. Sometimes they just upset until they really like the program and they want to come. But in the beginning, they fight. But those mothers say, I don't care how you feel. You getting your behind up and you going to school, to this class. With the boys, I've heard mothers say, well, he didn't feel like getting up, and I didn't want to wake him. I didn't want to bother him. And they won't hold the sons accountable. They will not make them come. Now, that's not all mothers, but that's too many for my liking. And so, what do you say about that saying, raising daughters, loving sons?
Yeah, Fatima, the inverse is true as well. I'm thinking about my own experience. I raise my boys, I mean, intentfully. I mean, like monitoring, watching, making sure they know. But then I love my daughter, you know.
See, and that's why balance is important.
That's why balance is important.
Because, see, we will raise our daughters. We'll make sure they get that. And so you don't have to worry about that, because your wife raised those girls.
Mama handles that, right.
She raised them. But in terms of the boys, she was loving up on them boys, but they had you to raise them. And herein lies the problem. That's why we're sitting here today.
Yeah, and that's one of the losses of two-parent families. And so, in the reality of it, you wake up, you're a single mom raising a kid, you gotta kind of have to be both. The first thing I think is you have to sort of see that in yourself. Kind of say, wait a minute, I'm raising my daughter differently than I'm raising my son, but my goal is to produce healthy human beings. But yet I'm taking two different approaches. You gotta step back from that, acknowledge it, and then think intentionally, how do you check your own self in that, right? I think in many cases, what women are trying to do is trying to ensure that they don't create an alienation or a distance from their sons. Somehow that if they're too hard on them, that if they're too overbearing, that they will see a distancing, right? And this is psychotherapy. I don't know if this is absolutely the case, but maybe there's some detachment issues that they're thinking through in their own life, and they don't want to sort of see that repeated in their own son, where their relationship to their male child is somehow severed. But there's something intuitive because of her life lived, that she knows how to raise a daughter because that's familiar, right? Yeah. And what I have seen, and we see this play out in education, and this is one of the phenomena that goes on with boys, particularly boys of color, and Jawanza Kunjufu talks about this, but also as boys get older, right, and they get taller, and they get physical, right? Mothers are, however they may discipline, whether it's voice or inner space or, if they spank or whatever the case may be, there's nothing in their mind that ever feels they're at vulnerability of a confrontation with their daughters. At least I hope not. But given the dynamics of male, female, and what the society is talking about in terms of confrontation and physicality, I think there's a point where the mother, absent anyone in the house who can come in and check it immediately, she knows that her language, the predictability or unpredictability of her son, from a height and from a size dynamic, all of a sudden, I think physical presence and the nuances when sons get taller than their mothers. We know this plays out with teachers, white teachers trying to educate black boys. I think perhaps a part of that plays out in terms of how assertively a mother may approach her male child.
And and that's this recent generation. We do know that. Because I remember my mother, I have 3 older brothers, and there were two of us, 2 girls. And my mother did not care how big those boys got. She'd pick up something, she would throw forks, she would throw pots. She said, "You will never be bigger than me." And that's kind of how I played it with my son.
Right.
And it was like, I don't care how big you get, you will never be bigger than me. But that's then. Now I can see that happening with the younger generation raising boys, where they are a little bit more apprehensive about stepping up on them. And that's not to say that that's the right approach either. We're not even suggesting that it's the right approach is for you to step up on your son. You should be.
You might need to at times,
Yeah, but if they are bigger, then you got to pick up something and you may kill them. And then we got a Marvin Gaye situation here. And we don't want that. But you're right. There may come a time when you do have to step up on them. But mothers are a little bit more apprehensive about doing that. But when we come back, because we've kind of run this segment down and so quickly, but I want us to talk about what do you think mothers can do to have a healthier relationship, not only with their son, because most of the relationships are pretty good, but to have a relationship where they know they can't raise a man per se, but they can give some, if you can give us some techniques and some things that we can do as women raising boys that could be a little bit better for the boy, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about what can we do that would be best for the son.
Absolutely.
To help him realize his manhood, and we're women.
Sure.
We're going to go to break, but we'll come right back. This is some good stuff.
And when I look into my children's eyes, I'm always thinking of what it is that can make my kids feel safe. If nothing else, I think that's what we can help our kids grow up with, that innocence. The fact is, my kids are going to be exposed to a lot more stuff that I ever was at an earlier age. It's concerning. Learning about the good that the Arizona Lottery is doing, it definitely changed perspective. I become a millionaire, great, but I know that there's something good that's happening out of it.
Welcome back. I'm Fatima Halim, and we're over here at Arizona State University Tempe campus with Associate Dean of Students, Alonzo Jones. And Alonzo is giving us some really wonderful tips or insight into the mind of the man raising the child and what some of the important things are that needs to happen. If you could kind of give us some tips as single mothers, some things that we do. I mentioned earlier about rites of passage and how the mothers didn't make their sons come. They just allowed them to kind of do what they wanted to do. And I know that that's not really a healthy thing for the child.
Right.
And another thing is that they don't, as mothers, as women, we tend to let our sons get away with a lot of stuff.
Right.
And what are some of the recommendations that you might have for mothers?
Yeah, first of all, I would say, there are mothers who are trying to do both, but to sort of step back at a moment of sort of thinking holistically about how am I doing raising my child, and to try to sort of leverage the village to an extent. To reach out to men if the biological father, if that relationship is severed, then obviously that you're not able to do that. Or if one's personal relationship, if we can put aside whatever the frustration may be and ask the poignant question about, hey, I need you to be in your child's life, assuming it doesn't bring in a lot of other chaos or problematic luggage, then what is the space in which the father can come in and play that role? Ideally, if you were in the house, you could see things unpredictable, you could parent in real time, but absence of that, what kind of frequency, what kind of communication, how do you use technology, what is consistent way for the biological dad to be in the child's life? If that is not an option, then how can the sister sort of reach out to her community? How can she identify brothers, an assortment of men, and I'm not talking amorous men that you have relationships with, but people who are concerned about the plight and direction and life of black men. There's plenty here within the Phoenix metropolitan area. You can go to community events and you see brothers out there with their children, and after, coming across individuals, just developing trust and a sense of who this individual is. And perhaps it is a gesture of vulnerability, but how do you say, hey, brother, my son is doing X, I'd like some input on your perspective, or what are you doing with your boys? And if that's a community event, let me know about that, and maybe, I'll bring my son out as well. But it's leveraging the community of men who are, I believe, at their core, see it as a part of their responsibility.
And if I may throw this out there, if you see the brother has a wife, make sure that you include her in this discussion.
Right.
Don't just run to the brother.
Then a whole nother nuance, right?
Because that's a whole nother thing. Also, I have found some women, which this is one of my pet peeves, sisters who use their children as pawns. And they're angry at the father because of what he did to her.
Right.
And so now they use the children, they say, well, you can't see your child. Or they keep the child away from the father. That, to me, is probably one of the worst things that you can do as a human being.
Yes.
And that's because your ego is hurt because of the relationship. Now you take the child away from the father.
Right.
And that happens all too often.
It does. Yeah, if your relationship with the father is already ruined, right? And you then, either way, choose to sort of use the child in a manipulative way to sort of attack back at either parent, then you're going down a road of ruining another life, right?
Exactly.
We have to be sophisticated enough to contextualize our own emotion, which is love or loss of love, and then come out of that and say, I have other identities, right? I was boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. That's an identity, but I also have an identity of a father or an identity of a mother, and that must be preserved. And that'll take a lot of communication and trust over a little bit of time, but to use a child as a pawn may give you personal, immediate satisfaction, but then you're not holding up your responsibility to produce a grown man. Oftentimes, relationships break because the absence of preparation prior to the production of a child. And then there's frustration that comes out of that. And then men who feel obligated, or through a court or a legislative kind of way, they're then forced to have still some connection to the child. And so there's a lot of resentment, and then they become an economic dad, right? Rather than an emotional, loving, caring, guiding kind of father, right? And so somehow in the narrative of things, if you can cut a check, you met fatherly responsibility. The child may help put some food on the table or buy some clothes, but those are aesthetic, those are external kinds of things. All human beings, men included, need nurturance, they need love, and they need that from more than a singular source. One of the dynamics I would encourage families, both two-parent or single-parent families, is to think about multi-generational family rearing. We were fortunate enough for a time to have my mother-in-law live in the house by design. And that was so that the babies could have a connection to grandma, right? An older generation could sort of sit at her feet, feel her love, understand her stories, right? She represents heritage and history, and grandparents have their own kind of nuanced relationship with children, but it also provided relief, right? So I'm in a two-parent family, and for a period of time, I was in a sort of a multi-generational kind of family rearing. So that's something to think about for single mothers, is what is your team, right? If people that you trust, and I'm sure that's going on in many different kind of ways. But back to your earlier question about sort of techniques and strategies. One thing I have found in my own parenting, particularly of my sons, is that if they can have routine, that then equals predictability. And when a child feels like they know what's going to happen next, and it's not unpredictable and random, and one time the house is calm, next minute it's frantic, right? If they have routine, that equals predictability, and we know from data that that minimizes stress. And when children have minimal stress, they feel generally good about themselves. They tend to be more open, more accepting, more trusting within boundaries. And then the other things that we ask them to focus on, activities, sports, family responsibilities, that's sort of a continuation. If the household is just frantic and unpredictable, the child picks up on that. They may not outwardly express it, they may internalize it, but at the end of the day, it's unhealthy.
So give me an example of what you mean by routine.
Routine, right? All right, so most people think the day starts when you wake up. The day starts actually when you go to sleep, because your fatigue factor or your alertness or your awakeness or your optimism about the morning tied into when and how you go to sleep, right? So one of the things we established very early was based upon age predicted bedtime, right? And you can't treat all your sons the same. You got to give deference to age. Because if you're going to ask the oldest son to have sort of some responsibility in the house, you want to give the oldest son some privilege in the house as well. So based upon age, you can go to sleep at a certain time, and then the younger you are, you're going to sleep earlier, right? So in there, you're establishing hierarchy, right? And you're also establishing that by age and accompanying responsibility, you get additional privilege, right? So you don't assign privilege just randomly. You actually base it upon some ritual, some age set. So you have, in my house, when they were younger, they were going to sleep at different times, right? So that establishes sleeping patterns. Then they wake up in the morning, and then you establish routine for the morning, right? Is that something, do they prepare their own breakfast? Are we getting up as parents, and we did as a younger age, and do we prepare that? Or does the child wake up knowing that I have a certain time I need to get up? I wake up on my own. I got to find some time in the bathroom. I got to get my backpack together. These are moments of self-responsibility. And in single-parent homes or multiple children homes like mine, you can't just put all that load on one or two parents. So you begin to give your children responsibility. And then even when you get into the car, seating arrangements, right? These are things that are important to young kids. Some of the biggest fights I have is about who gets the front seat, who doesn't get the front seat. So you create ritual to say, hey, no, on this, based upon age, you sit here. I also have a ritual that at 10 years old, I write a letter to my sons, to my kids, and I say, hey, you're 10 now, you're in double digits. This is how I think you're doing academically. This is how I think you're doing as a son or a daughter in the house. And given your 10-year-old status, you now have some privileges. And one of the privileges is that they get a day where they get in the front. Now that's laughable as old people thinking about that. But when you're 10 years old or 9 years old and 9 months and you're about to say, hey, I'm about to get my day, right? That's something to look forward to. So it's a little thing and it's an intentional. And so with the ritual, you come home after school. Do you go to technology? Do you go outside? Do you just go do nothing? Or do you know I'm coming home and automatically the expectation in my house is that I grab a snack and I start doing the books, right? And so at any given time, I don't have to literally be in the house, but I know what time it is, what my kids should be doing, and it's predictable. The other thing too, in terms of a routine, is we made a decision, my wife and I, that kids couldn't watch TV during the week, so that form of technology never comes into play. And then with smartphones, something that picked up later on, that has to sort of go aside when they're time to focus in on homework. And then even if they finish homework at 8 and they're going to sleep at 9, that time you can't go to the technology. They have to sort of think in their mind and find something to do. But that just repeats itself. And then on the weekends, they wake up, no matter what time they wake up, they can't turn the TV on or the technology until noon. That's not punishment, that's just establishing routine. Right? That's my wife and I thinking intentionally about their day-to-day. If you want to manage a long-term life, you got to establish routine in minutes and moments and hours, and then that is predictable, and the routine is affirming harmony in the house, self-autonomy, priority of education, and then coupled in with a little bit of time for just leisure and sort of downplay.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible. And it's simple. It's not something that's...
Very simple.
And it's not like you said, it's not a punishment. It's just establishing routine. It's getting them to understand exactly what their role is, because they do have a role.
Yeah.
You know, it's not. You're just not a kid growing up in my house. You're a kid with responsibility.
It's not
with
random.
Accountability.
It's not random. If a previous generation, you could orient a child to wake up, work laboriously in agriculture, get something to eat, go back out, work laboriously, get in the house, fatigue, put them to sleep. If you can train a child to do that, you can also train a child. That's an arbitrary word, but you can orient a child to have a certain kind of other existence.
Now,
Intentionality.
let's talk a little bit more about these games, because I've seen kids, including some of my own grandchildren, who will spend hours, literally hours, on the Xbox or the whatever else box they have there,
right,
or on their telephones, just talking and texting. That has to be, well, it is damaging, and it's so damaging. And how do you now wean them off? Because if that has now become the routine, how do you wean them off of that?
Yeah. You know, technology, I think children need a form of technology, because otherwise they'll be sort of somewhat handicapped in going forward, because so much of the world is technological based. So I believe it's okay. Your children become very comfortable and familiar, and that technology is a normal part of their life. I think that's a skill set they'll need in the future. The way I do it is to just say stop, take it away. That's a form of punishment in my house. What I do is we create things to where to do that activity, they can't have the technology, right? And that's one of my other premises around raising children. That's exposure, exposure, exposure.
We have run out of time.
I'm sorry.
No, are you serious?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where I ask you to do a minute and a half, 2-minute segments on a weekly basis, or at least when my show comes on, where you can talk to us about parenting, parent to parent. I think that's a good title that you even mentioned.
Yeah.
Parent to parent. Where you can kind of give us some techniques that are necessary for us to raise healthier children, be it boy or girl. Thank you so much, Alonzo. We'll be seeing much more of you. You have been absolutely magnificent.
Fatima, thank you so
My
much.
brother.
Appreciate you. Yes,
Thank
indeed.
you. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you again when Focus continues.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of Focus. And if you'd like to contact us, if there's a topic you'd like to see us present or someone you'd like us to talk to, the information is right up on the screen. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week. Same station, same time, and Focus continues.